Well, hello. As I'm sure you know by now, my name is Joe Powell, and I'm giving one of my chief executive updates, as I promised I would do 4 times a year as part of our Mirror strategy. That's our business plan. The idea is to stay in touch with members and the People First movement, to give you an idea about the work of All Wales People First and what we're doing, so you have an idea as members what we're being involved in. I think the first thing to say in this new year is that we've been working, very hard behind the scenes. You may not have seen much of us, but we have been working hard. But we're gearing up to try to return to a new and normal as possible this year. So within the staff team, and we're trying to get out and about as much as we can, have staff team meetings, and especially when we do member engagement things with the national and regional councils. I think the big thing that a lot of people have struggled with and suffered with since COVID has been that lack of normality. The obvious things like the fear of COVID, being isolated and lonely. I personally believe it's more than that. I believe it's people living in constant lack of normality. So we want to try and get this up and running again with our members. And also, let's face it, proper and true member engagement is stronger, and it's more dependable when we're actually in the same room together, working together. So obviously we'll only ever do that as long as everybody feels safe. And our member engagement advisor, Tracy Drew, will obviously check in with groups and National Council to check they are okay with that. So in May, our next National Council, we're going to have a residential and an extraordinary general meeting, because we need to ask your permission to change a couple of things in our constitution. So that is our Memonarts, our constitution, and that's the rules that All Wales People First has to run the organisation by. We'll give you more information about that later, but please be aware that that's coming. I think we're in a very strange situation, one that I've never witnessed in my lifetime, and I think even generations older than mine have never seen anything like this. It's so much uncertainty, so much change. If you look at things like austerity and benefit cuts and Brexit, and then we've had COVID, and now when you're hoping COVID's over, we have this awful situation in the Ukraine, which is going to affect a person's cost of living on the people who live in the country. What we have to do is, and I guess if you want to look for positives, it's good that the research our members have done, a very important impact they've played in working on the impact of COVID-19 with researchers from the University of South Wales, and also our members' work on reviewing and evaluating the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act. It's given clear indications, I think, on both cases that there is still an awful lot of inequalities there. My frustration is the fact that we've kind of already always known this. And I think research is great and whatever, but it is frustrating sometimes when we wait for research to tell us stuff that we kind of already know. But if we're going to look for a positive, the positive is this, and that is, this is very much a hot topic now, especially coming out of COVID, we hope. The consequences of Brexit. This is why it's really, really important as well. We measure the impact on the lives of people with learning disabilities. So please keep sharing your stories with Kelly and the comms team. And please keep sharing your experiences with us, because we have to make sure that when things get to a more normal, and I hope it's starting now, things are at least the same as they were before. I mean, obviously what we had before wasn't fair, but we just don't want them to be any worse. And then hopefully, ideally, with the lessons we learn from all of this work, we start to see members' lives improve and get better. But that is always the challenge. And that is always, I guess, the fly in the ointment, isn't it? That's always the tough bit. And that's what we keep fighting for every day. So just a big thanks to members for everybody who works so hard on doing that work. I think it makes a big case for the power and the voice of self-advocacy. And again, people with learning disabilities informing what's important for their lives and being in control of what's important for their lives, which is the way it should be. I think the biggest piece of work we're doing at the moment, and our biggest concern, is that of the Human Rights Review. So for those of you who don't know, in Westminster, they're looking at the Human Rights Act, and ways to reform it. We're very worried about it for a few reasons, but first of all, the new Human Rights Act, which will replace the current one, it seems to be much weaker than what we have now. Making changes and changing the way we do things is all great, and we've got no issues with that if it's better. But there are certain arguments being made for why certain changes need to be made in the Human Rights Act, and in actual fact, the Human Rights Act we have already adequately addresses these things better than what's been proposed. What's been scary for us is the general public. This is not just people with learning disabilities, the general public. A lot of people don't know this is going on, and it's sneaking in through the back door, and their human rights as well will be potentially weakened. So let alone people with learning disabilities who often have to rely on kind of a human rights angle more than your average bear, because of the situation that all disabled people are in, often of exclusion. So the stakes couldn't be any higher. In 1998, the Human Rights Act was passed, and the idea of passing it was that we would bring United Kingdom courts in line with European courts. So instead of people making a human rights claim in the UK and it failing because the legal system's different, then somebody has to go all the way to Europe to appeal it, win the appeal, and come back. The whole point of it was that people could settle their claims in the United Kingdom. With some of the changes proposed, it would ultimately mean that people would be forced again. The chances are that the UK legislation wouldn't line up with the European one. So any claim that's made could potentially be more likely to fail in a UK court. This means people have to go to a European court to then appeal it. This means a backlog of cases to be heard. This means people have to wait longer to get the outcome. And I think especially important for our members, not everybody can afford to take something to Europe and to take a case to Europe. So, I'm personally very worried that by default, people won't chase or push for their human rights challenges due to the fact that, they can't afford to do it, or they're not able to have the support, to go through the hassle of it. And people by default might just have to put up with things that maybe they shouldn't have had to put up with in the past. And I think that's what's really important. What's very interesting about this act is it's very difficult for me to come to you and say, under the current act, you will get this right. Under the other act, you will lose that right. And this is what's happening. It's very hard to give you an A for B comparison because the way it's written is quite subtle, and it talks good language in terms of the principles, in terms of the moral things it's trying to do. But sometimes it's in what it's not saying that is the problem. And again, the fact that things are slightly weakened in there, well, very weakened, I would say, is what concerns me. I mean, politically in this country, I remember certainly since I was younger in the 90s, there's been a big political divide in Westminster, particularly about Europe having power, making decisions which can trump the decisions that are made in the United Kingdom. And a lot of people feel quite bitter about that because a lot of people think, well, we should make our own rules and our laws here in Britain. Other politicians think, well, no, it's for the greater good that certain decisions are made by Europe, so we have a fairer, transparent system that everybody can work to as equals. Now, whatever side of the argument you're on, one of the big problems is for people with learning disabilities, having a Human Rights Act is, I mean, what else is there? You know what I mean? For people with learning disabilities during these difficult times, a robust Human Rights Act is the only hope so many people with learning disabilities have. And that can never be weakened. It would be a travesty if that was ever weakened. So Kelly, our policy and communications manager, has been working with members, as has Tracy Drew, our member engagement advisor. And Kelly's been liaising with the British Institute of Human Rights and we've also been working with Pembrokeshire People First to be making a strong representation about this. So thank you to everybody who's worked so hard on that. Thank you to all the members who have given us quotes and have given us your experiences. That has all gone into a consultation response, which has been submitted to the government, and a joint response with the British Institute of Human Rights. We've managed to be part of a group of people who've put enough pressure on the government to put the consultation period back by 6 weeks, because again, my constant frustration during COVID, and again before COVID, but especially now, has been the lack of accessible information. And when this consultation was released, there was no real decent quality, accessible, easy read information for people with learning disabilities. So whilst there was a 12-week window to respond, people with learning disabilities essentially didn't really have any window to respond because it wasn't accessible and the forms weren't accessible, and lots of people didn't even know this consultation was going on. So, we've managed to be part of a group of people, many people, who put pressure on Westminster to extend the deadline for 6 weeks. So that gives you 6 weeks to put a response in if you want to. The more individual responses we get, the better. That's by individual people, individual organisations, and the stronger it will be. What's really important, I think, for all MPs in Westminster to understand is when they come to vote on any human rights reforms, is the potential impact on people with learning disabilities on the ground, the subtle changes which actually could mean quite substantial changes in terms of equal rights for people with learning disabilities and other protected characteristics. So we're hoping with the work we're doing to get the message to senior people out there that, go into this with your eyes wide open. MPs in Westminster, go into this with your eyes wide open and, make sure you understand what it is you're actually voting for and the consequences of that, not just for people with learning disabilities, but all citizens. The difficulty we had with the whole PIP situation, and a lot of our members had a lot of stress with that, and then they succeeded in their PIP claim on the second claim. Things like that remind you that we take certain things for granted for such a long time. We just expect benefits and we just expect things to happen until such a time comes as somebody does threaten them, and then we realise just how important they are. And this is why we have to keep fighting and keep pushing. At the end of the day, people with learning disabilities, as you know, have been disproportionately affected and excluded from taking part in society, from being having access to jobs and real lives in the community. So that's an injustice. But if we can't plug or we can't close that injustice, the least we can do is make sure people have their human rights. The stakes couldn't be any higher. And I can just promise you that the organisation, it's top priority at the moment for the organisation. Kelly, Tracy and the members have worked very, very hard, in particularly on this. So a big thanks to them for that. I just want to come on to now for AdFest 2022. So AdFest will be taking place on the 21st and the 22nd of June at the Key Hotel in Conway. And the theme of this year's AdFest is going to be Reconnect. And the National Council conference subgroup, decided to have a conference about how we're going to reconnect to the community and to society post-COVID, after COVID. And that's what this is all going to be about. We're hoping as well, by having it in the summer, from now on, we can tie it in with Learning Disability Week. The summer's a nice, positive, warm, bright time. We hope after being locked down by COVID, people are all going to be up for a party and have fun and get together with friends. And we hope it's going to be a great opportunity for people to let off a bit of steam, a bit of lockdown steam. We're going to have a few things going on there. We're going to have devil's advocacy there. So, when I challenge members about issues and then get their feedback and their point of view and bring people in, there's that aspect to it. We have 3 workshops One is Magic Moments. So Nick Andrews and Richard Williams will be doing a workshop on learning and developing together through storytelling. Workshop 2 is Health and Wellbeing. That's run by Carmarthenshire People First. Carmarthenshire People First produced some fabulous materials on winter wellbeing work, which All Wales People First purchased so that we could ask local groups to deliver this during COVID to the members. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, those who've taken part in it have had a lot of fun with the work. I went recently to see Caerphilly People First and the work they've done on their winter wellbeing, and it was good fun. It really was. I think everybody's enjoyed it. I think everybody's learned something from it. And the project is based on how to keep safe, looking after your physical and mental well-being during COVID, during lockdown. So I think it's been a brilliant piece of work, and something, you know, I'm delighted All Wales People First has been able to partner up with Carmarthenshire People First, you know, to have some involvement in. And the Welsh Government thankfully funded this piece of work on all of our behalf. So that's really, really good. And the last workshop, last but not least, is Holding On To Your Rights. And that's going to be delivered by the British Institute of Human Rights. You know, I've often said it before, it's with self-advocacy, it's not just about fighting for your rights. It's about holding onto your rights once you've got them. You know, you don't just achieve your rights and then that's it. Ta-da, it's all finished. You've then got to scrap to keep them. So the British Institute of Human Rights will hopefully be able to give you some advice about, you know, how to make sure that during these post-COVID times that you're protected, that you get the best that you're entitled to, and you have the confidence to speak out as well about what your rights are and about what you should be entitled to. So there's 3 workshops and you get to pick 2. We are going to post the details to you very soon, so you'll have all of the information you need about booking, about workshops, so you don't need to worry too much about that now. But all I ask is please, 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 fill in your workshops, fill in your forms, get it back to us as soon as possible, because it makes our life much easier from an organisational point of view if we have plenty of advance notice, so we can make sure everybody gets their rooms, everybody gets booked on, that nobody's disappointed and doesn't get to do something they want to do. So please fill in your form, please return it. It'll be coming to you very soon. And again, you've got 3 workshops to choose from, 2 out of those 3. So we just want you to pick 2 of those 3, but the form will explain more. And as ever, we're going to have our Mirror Awards. So please get your nominations in by Friday, the 6th of May at 5 o'clock. You email Sarah Ansell with information about that if you want to. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate another member, another person with a learning disability. You can nominate somebody without a learning disability in the community who's helped empower the learning disability community somehow, who's opened their doors somehow to accessing community or whatever. There's a whole range of things you can apply for. So please, please, please consider that, so we can make that very, very special. I think all I would like to end with is just to send our best wishes to the people of Ukraine. And I think, you know, obviously everybody there, it's a terrible situation, but obviously given what we are and what we do, especially people with learning disabilities, we do hope that people with learning disabilities are not unfairly affected by the crisis and that they still get the support they need. We've been also in contact with Milan Sverpa, who is the Chief Executive of Inclusion Europe, and we've all worked together. You know, European organisations have had an email chain together talking about our concern that maybe people with learning disabilities may not get the support that they're entitled to or they should have during this time, or maybe their needs would be less priority during a time of crisis. Obviously, that is not the fault of the Ukraine government in any way, shape or form. It's got so much to contend with and deal with. But obviously, we'd like Europe, the wider European, Europe, to obviously help as much as they can if possible to recognise this. I think personally it's important that when we give aid to Ukraine, that things like this are factored into the donations we give to make sure everybody's all right in that respect. And as part of that as well, hopefully we've interviewed some of our members to give some video messages which we can share with Inclusion Europe, so we can show the love to the Ukraine from learning disability organisations across Europe, show our solidarity and show our support. I think things like the Ukraine, as I said before, in terms of human rights, it's another reminder that things you think will not happen or cannot happen sometimes actually do happen. You can never take anything for granted. That's not being negative, and that's not trying to be pessimistic. It's just a rule of life. It's just a fact of life. And I think this is why we never ever should take our human rights for granted, why we should never stop fighting to get our human rights, and why I think every day we should be grateful for the rights we have, and realise how lucky we are. We might not always think we're lucky living in the United Kingdom when it's rainy and it's grey, but you know what? Usually it's a safe place to live. There's a lot worse places out there, and things like this, I think, just bring back to your attention just what we take for granted. Thank you for listening to my video, Victory for Self-Advocacy. I'm really looking forward to catching up with you in person very soon.